Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be going over another Tool song. For lack of better recommendation, if you have one, please put one down below. But Tool is pretty in-depth, and it's good for, at least for myself, to articulate what I'm hearing. Because the more you can put your feelings to words, or I guess your understanding to words, the better you will be when you then have to engage with another person. Why do you listen to X? Well, here is why. And there's a lot of depth in this song that I would say even appeals to probably one of the biggest commands that Christ gave to all of his followers. So I hope you stick with me for a little bit. So maybe that was a little bit of a teaser, because if I try to directly equate anything from Tool to Christ, like immediate negative comments all over the place. And take that for what it is, but there are similarities between good moral teachers or divine sons of God and how culture works in reality. So, as per I guess tradition, I'm going to read the lyrics of this song, and then I'm going to dissect them bit by bit, and we're going to pull out the aspect of this song that appeals to the hero's journey within us, that basically calls to everything and helps us guide our steps as we continue on. So this is the first song on their Lateralus album. I already did a whole breakdown of the song Lateralus, which is extremely amazing, positive, motivating. Highly recommend listening to the song at least once in your life if you haven't before. But this is the Grudge. This is the first song, and the Grudge is exactly what you think it is about. And it gets into a little bit of mysticism. So, per C.S. Lewis, there's a thing called magic, and two things are the worst you can do in your relationship to magic. The first one is to think it doesn't exist, to think that mystical systems don't exist. The second one is to develop an unnatural obsession toward it. Both of those are bad, so it's good to maybe acknowledge it and maybe say that's not my realm, that kind of thing. So I'm gonna be going over where they get some of their points of reference from, and I can't help but dive into the alchemic mystic part of our history, which is like it developed during the Middle Ages. So here we go. Wear the grudge like a crown of negativity. Calculate what we will or will not tolerate. Desperate to control all and everything. Unable to forgive your scarlet lettermen. Clutch it like a cornerstone, otherwise it all comes down. Justify denials and grip them to the lonesome end. Clutch it like a cornerstone, otherwise it all comes down. Terrified of being wrong, ultimatum, prison cell. Saturn ascends, choose 1 or 10. Hang on or be humbled again. Humbled again. Clutch it like a cornerstone, otherwise it all comes down. Justify denials and grip them to the lonesome end. Saturn ascends, comes round again. Saturn ascends, the 1, the 10, ignorant to the damage done. Wear the grudge like a crown of negativity. Calculate what we will or will not tolerate. Desperate to control all and everything. Unable to forgive your scarlet lettermen. Wear the grudge like a crown. Desperate to control, unable to forgive, and sinking deeper. Defining, confining, sinking deeper. Controlling, defining, and we're sinking deeper. Saturn comes back around to show you everything, lets you choose what you will and will not see, and then drags you down like a stone or lifts you up again, spits you out like a child, light and innocent. Saturn comes back around, lifts you up like a child, or drags you down like a stone to consume you till you choose to let this go. Choose to let this go. Give away the stone. Let the ocean take and transmutate this cold and faded anchor. Give away the stone. Let the waters kiss and transmutate these leaden grudges into gold. So that's a lot of repetition up and down. But that takes a little bit to dissect. This whole song is like, it really gets you in the mood to listen to something. It's highly motivated, high tempo, hardcore. So listening to all that, how would I make that go to Christ? Because that sound kind of, fist in your face, kind of hardcore hammering into lyrics. Well, it takes a minute, but not really. I also got to be careful in my terminology, because there is Christian, and then there are followers of Christ. There's a distinct difference. Some people choose to go to church as if it's like a day club, a social gathering. And if you do that without legitimate truth-seeking, unfortunately what usually happens, at least what I've seen happen, is a pious church develops. The whole structure becomes corporate. Money takes the seat. At least it does a lot of the time. And then it becomes the pious church, and like, you better look the part and look well, even in the congregation. Heaven forbid you sin, you'll be the first person everyone talks about. And maybe the sermon will be about you too. That kind of piousness. So that's not that's a corporate engagement. True followers of Christ want to emulate that character. They should want to, and they should read their Bibles, and they should familiarize themselves with the history of the character of Christ. So that's just a little caveat there. Wear the grudge like a crown of negativity. Calculate what we will or will not tolerate. So the grudge itself, so what is that? That's, holding on to something. That's like, I am right, and I am not going to forgive you for being not like me. So that's a crown of negativity, and if you've ever had somebody who doesn't forgive another person, usually the other person that they have a grudge against, they have to constantly remind themselves that they have been scarred. It's like willfully cutting a wound in your mind. And oftentimes they obsess over another person, and that will definitely keep your eyes off of whatever the highest aim is. So the whole calculating part is something like, instead of letting context define the circumstance, you live yourself by law. And if someone breaks this law, well, they're out of the kingdom. Man, sorry, that's just how it is, and there's no forgiveness. Desperate to control all and everything, that's pharisaical. That's one of the people that Christ had the biggest problem with, the people who he debated with, were the Pharisees, and they were the ones who had, they had the law, 613 laws, then they had the law surrounding the law, in case they broke those laws, and they had a law, I think it's the minutia, surrounding the law, all to keep you pure. But the problem is, if you follow the law, that's made by man. It's not a direction. It's like you're in a box and there's no room for growth. That's desperate to control all and everything, and that's like the Catholic Church in the Dark Ages, when there's some of them quoted in Fox's Book of Martyrs, like, if we have to deny the Gospels to preserve the Church, then I guess that's what we're going to do, and you're just like, well, what? It's crazy. Unable to forgive your scarlet lettermen. So that's from the Scarlet Letter, and from what I understand, from what I remember, it's a Puritan concept, and if you're an adulterer, you have to wear a red letter A on yourself. So that way you can always be known as an adulteress, because I think the character was feminine in that book. And then no one can forgive you. You're scarred. You're etched onto something that you did, maybe a lapse in judgment, and it's impossible to forgive you in that community. That is what you are from then on. Clutch it like a cornerstone. Otherwise it all comes down. Justify denials and grip them to the lonesome end. So when you have a grudge against somebody else, that's something you really do hold on to. And there's a difference between someone who forgives and someone who does not. Holding on to the grudge obviously is like willful resentment. Christ said that if you have to worship at the altar and you have had an altercation with your brother, leave the altar, go make amends with your brother. That has to happen first before you can worship God. Because if you don't, then it's going to become like a stone. It's a weight. It will prevent you from growing. It'll prevent you from being well. It'll prevent you from participating in community and culture properly. And you will be very alone, because everyone around you that's part of your crew, they will continue to grow and live life, and you are just stuck in this one little moment. If it's a teenager and you resent somebody or something, you're stuck there forever, because every time you try to grow, you're going to remember that moment, which was way back in time, and your entire being will just go back to that moment. Clutch it like a cornerstone, otherwise it all comes down. Terrified of being wrong. Ultimatum, prison cell. Because if you're not right about this, it's especially if you hold on to a grudge for a very long time, that's your identity. And if you're wrong about being mad at somebody else, well, you're not God. Like, it's an assumption, like, you know everything there is about this situation, whatever situation caused you to be in conflict with each other, and you made a judgment, and you're sticking with it, because you have eternal judgment. That's what you have. But it's a prison cell. You get stuck in there. You're unable to be humbled. You're unable to literally forgive, because you have to be right. And that's honestly the devil. So the devil, if you look at the concept of Satan, it's the accuser, yes, in the biblical scriptures, but it's also somebody who does not hold himself accountable to anybody else. That's also, well, Satanism. It's all about you. It's all about the internal, externally represented. Something like that. Because then if you do go back on your word, then you are no longer infallible. And that's a problem if you are trying to wear your pride on your sleeve, and you're trying to prove everybody else wrong, and you're trying to get ahead, and you're trying to look the part. The next part, Saturn ascends, choose 1 or 10, hang on or be humbled again. So this comes from the Kabbalah tree of life. Now, I only researched this for a little bit. It's decent in the alchemaic sense. And it's probably one of the foundations of it, but it's not too terribly old. It's a concept that came out of like the Middle Ages. Sorry, the Middle Ages, not Middle Ages, Dark Ages, somewhere around there, from Jewish mysticism. And it's not a tree per se. It's just like the hierarchies of what is. And I actually have a picture of it here. There it is. So when he says choose 1 or 10, 1 is the transcendent. That's at the top there. 10 is the kingdom. That's the material plane of Earth. So choose transcendent perspective or stay on the Earth. Saturn is actually associated with number 3, which is understanding. That's like your first level of consciousness, like ascended consciousness. So that's you recognizing that you have a problem. So you can choose to either double down on your problem or let it go. The reference to Saturn is it's the idea that Saturn, wherever you or I were born, 27 to 29 years later, I think there's some wiggle room in there. It'll eventually go back to the same spot it was when you were born. And that's a time of renewal in like the mystical astrological sense, right? So that's what he's talking about when he says choose 1 or 10. Choose the transcendent perspective, choose growing and seeing what actually is going on, or choose to double down on it when Saturn comes back around to renew yourself. Saturn ascends, comes round again. Saturn ascends, the 1, the 10, ignorant to the damage done. If you choose to double down, you absolutely cannot go higher, at least on that plane. That's the point of reference I'm going to try to make for this. Where Christ gets tied into this is, especially if you're a follower of Christ, you cannot be a follower of Christ unless you forgive. And that's honestly why I am not like a Muslim or anything else, because forgiveness is not compulsory in the Muslim faith, or in any faith. Especially the karmic cycle. Heaven forbid you forgive somebody and they can't pay back their karmic debt. So that kind of rubs it in the face of the New Age movement. And if Saturn comes back around like once every 27 to 29 years, that's a long time, man. And if you don't choose to refresh and renew your life at that moment, well, according to at least the Kabbalah tree of life, you got like another 30 years ahead of you that you're going to have to live like that. And it might take you that long just to wake up from whatever funk you put yourself in. Saturn comes back around to show you everything, lets you choose what you will and will not see. You get to choose that. You can choose to see it from someone else's perspective or only your own selfish perspective. Drags you down like a stone or lifts you up again. Spits you out like a child, light and innocent. So children, if they want to go to the kingdom of God, this is per Christ again, you come like a little child. You ask questions. You get humbled. You're going to be wrong a lot. Especially when it comes to the infinite. Finite beings in one little sliver of time in one little tiny space compared to the infinite cosmos and infinite time. We're going to be wrong about a lot. That's just how life is. We could be right about a lot too, comparatively to our time here. But the goal is to be humble and ever learning. Give away the stone. Let the oceans take and transmutate this cold and faded anchor. Give away the stone and let the waters kiss and transmutate these leaden grudges into gold. So that's pretty obvious there. Tool is encouraging letting go of the grudge. Don't let it hold on. Don't let it keep you down here. In the hero's journey, when you have that paradigm, you start out in the normal and you go to hell and then you come back. It's ever fractaling out as you mature. That'll keep you down in hell. That'll keep you unchanged but constantly like churning because you'll be unable to grow. It's something you have to like willfully hang on to. That cold and faded anchor. Let the waters kiss and transmutate these leaden grudges into gold. Now, obviously that's an alchemaic reference at the end. The leaden grudges into gold. The waters kissing is interesting because I know from the Mesopotamian stories that the first two beings that caused reality to exist was like the goddess of fresh water and the god of salt water. I got those switched. The god of fresh water and the goddess of salt water, and they mixed together, and they created a difference between the two, something like that. They created El out of that. I believe that's how the story goes. But they had to mix together to create all of reality. They were separate, they were chaos, but there had to be a dividing line between them that was specific, that was not them. And that's let there be light, if you want to go by the scriptural sense of it. Light divides. Light makes this different than that. Gives you perspective. Lets you see. And if you see and you can manipulate, you can also change. Both in the material and in the transcendent. So I guess one of the bigger takeaways you want to get from this is the concept of forgiveness and letting go, and not letting resentment be something that burdens your heart so much you cannot even live and progress. Because if you hold on to a grudge, it's a commitment, and you probably won't even be able to voluntarily let go of it for a long time. You might have to go through some hard trials just because you want to hold on to being right. And that's very dangerous. That's very scary. That's the hero's journey. And that's Christ saying, if something causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. Heaven forbid you're holding on to that rock and it just keeps you at the bottom of the ocean for your entire life. That'd be a problem. So what's better? Being crushed under the waves and suffocating because you're holding on to what you want? Or maybe rising back to the surface, one less arm, but with a message for the world like, yo, don't do what I did. And that betters your fellow man. So if you want to see more examples of the hero's journey, check out this video up here that YouTube recommends. We could see how much further this goes.